some chosen up there. But let's go ahead and get started. Today we're joined by Ryan Deitsch. This is Jay. Welcome to Tragedy Academy, a show created to bridge societal divides in a judgment-free zone using candor and humor. How you doing today, Ryan?
Doing just swell. And yourself?
Living the dream, my man. Ryan is known for his advocacy work with March for Our Lives, some content creation, and involvement with another social media phenomenon that we'll talk about later. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of go from there?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in South Florida. Uh, I was born and raised there to an American Jewish household. Uh, I had a rather good childhood, a rather safe childhood. That was up until my senior year of high school, where my hometown of Parkland experienced one of the worst high school mass shooting tragedies our nation has seen. With 17 dead and 17 injured. I myself was put under lockdown for several hours, not knowing if I was going to live or die in the closet of the school journalism classroom. From that experience, I worked as a student journalist covering the stories of various people who are surviving the shooting. Uh, in real time. And I used that experience to talk to various media, and that eventually led to organizing with my fellow students for what became known as the March for Our Lives,
Mhm.
which led a mass protest on March 24th, 2018. One of the largest youth-led protests throughout American history. And then that led to hundreds of chapter organizations, students ranging from elementary all the way through to grad school, joining this movement for gun violence prevention and for youth empowerment. And that was really the last 4 or 5 years. I've been doing a lot of that advocacy work. Alongside that, I attended American University, where I received a degree in international service, focusing on U.S. foreign policy and human rights. Uh, so now it brings me to, after all of that time in DC, I'm trying to dedicate myself to more creative ventures, lean into more of my passionate creative side. So I've moved to New York City
Good for you.
and am doing various work in screen and stage.
I love that. And I want to preface before we go any further that I could not begin to fathom what that would be like as an adult, much less as a child. I don't believe that anybody should ever have to endure something like that. PTSD is real. It is a lifelong battle with various modicums of or different ways to take care of yourself through it. But on the surface, it's one of the most terrifying things to think that a child is going through and being left, you know, uncared for. Because I feel like that was kind of the situation with this particular shooting.
I mean, the issue that we experienced, the tragedy of everything that happened was, and what a lot of the young people organizing in the town after the fact, it was that we had this sort of collective idea that the adults in our lives had failed us in a way,
Mm,
that the safety that we were told would be ever present clearly was not, especially, I mean, in a classroom setting. So that sort of shattering of reality led us to, there was a time where the older people and the younger people in town, there were some schisms and divisions.
mm,
I feel that a lot of that has been healed over with time, but definitely there was a lot of animosity and distrust.
mm,
Given that, I mean, my hometown of Parkland was voted the safest city in Florida for a decade prior to the shooting.
mm.
So to and I say that as also to make people aware, for those listening, that this can fundamentally happen anywhere in this country. It's an absolutely
It
tragic
has.
reality. It continues to, and it's a tragic reality we find ourselves in. But what I've been doing, what my friends and colleagues have been doing, is just trying to empower ourselves, trying to empower communities that not only face these tragedies, but try to prevent these tragedies from ever occurring, because we know that that journey of trauma and PTSD, that's a lifelong journey, that we don't want to accumulate more and more people going through such things if they frankly don't have to.
Completely understand what you're saying. I like to use the analogy of glasses and prescriptions. And you said something that stuck out to me. You said that the adults or parents or whomever the figures were in those positions had failed you as a generation or as the people, the children that were in that school, whatever it might be. I think it's pretty good to assume that that's kind of the situation that we're looking at as a whole. Um, and it concerns me a lot because I feel like showing weakness or misunderstanding of somebody else's plight is not something that is going to expose you to ridicule. It's actually going to heal wounds. And when I talk about glasses and I talk about when I say it, I say there's prescriptions for every experience that we go through. That is another change to your lens. And every person goes through a separate set of experiences that are only predicated on what they've seen and nobody else, especially in sequence, right? So that means that when you're sitting down with somebody and they're telling you how they feel or what they see or what their plight is, it is up to you to understand that just like when you're at the table and you do that little game where you exchange glasses and you go, I can't see." Well, guess what? That applies to experiences in life and viewpoints from different areas. And I feel like our generation, for your generation, need to understand that just because we have a wisdom prescription, we don't have an experience prescription in that area. We don't know what it's like to live in fear in the same way in a classroom. I know I didn't. I lived in a small town or a rural community in butt fuck Florida, right? There wasn't nothing happening there. I mean, there was always rumors. People had like shotguns in the back windows of their car. Again, Florida is Alabama is Florida's Twinkie filling. Like, we know this. But I hear you when you say that. And I encourage people of the other generation to look back and say, hey, you know what? I don't have that prescription. So I've got to believe what they're telling me at face value because people don't scream when they're not in pain. I'll repeat that. People don't scream when they're not in pain unless they're faking. And it's real easy to see when a whole entire generation is shaking in their boots and telling you, why does everybody have these guns or whatever the thought process is? We have no way to look back. Again, I don't sit on any fence with anything with this show. If you've noticed, the logo's a yin yang. We like to keep it that way. And every good, there's a little evil. Every evil, there's a little good. Nothing's perfect, right? And it does me no good to ever stand on any pedestal and yell into somebody else's face because that's just never worked since the dawn of time. But we can talk about things like mental health for the victims, for the people that end up with these arms in their hands, and for what you're doing now. Because I think that there is a huge, huge, what's the word I'm looking for here? Note to be taken with regard to you looking back at what you've been through, but now pivoting to become the creator that you are or were created to be. I feel like that's a fundamental thing that we'll explain later. I want to talk
Yeah.
about, but you follow me so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that, our generation needs to realize that, and we can apply that to all situations. Societal divides, any kind of segregation of any sort is predicated on their experiences, not mine, if I'm on the opposing side of it or viewpoint or have not experienced it.
And I just want to be absolutely clear, especially with the sort of in my political organizing and the various things that I've advocated for and worked on. I've met with people all across, primarily the
Of course you
continental
did.
United States, people all across the planet, all age ranges, people from all sorts of walks of life. And I personally, I will say, I am not against firearms as a tool. I'm not against people owning them, especially I'm not against people who feel a genuine need to have self-defense or
Hmm.
people who want to have a hobby, a sporting hobby of some kind. What I am against is unnecessary carnage, violence against especially mass crowds of people to the point in which society cannot function peaceably. I think we need to make sure that we can still have room for community alongside these sorts of tools because these are
Absolutely.
tools, and it's a matter of whose hands are they in. And I think, especially in the United States, we don't do the best of jobs disarming domestic abusers, people who have
Mm.
been known to be violent against others or themselves, especially because we know that a lot of the gun violence statistics, almost half, if not over, account for suicides. Which I mean, that
you,
again,
you could
we
repeat
have to
that,
be
please.
addressing the mental
That
health.
last piece. Can you repeat that?
It's that a lot of the gun violence statistics, it does come to its self-inflicted self-harm wounds involving firearms.
That should speak volumes in and of itself. I don't own weapons. I don't own weapons for one reason and one reason only. I don't care what anybody else is doing as long as they're hurting others. But I have mental health issues that have led me down paths where I've, been very close to suicide or have attempted different things. And I know that if that had been in a box in my home, shit, that's a quick one. Like there are points in time in my life where who wouldn't want to? That's the easiest way out. And we don't need to provide that if it doesn't need to be provided. We have to talk to people and find out what it is that, they're going through long before we ever can toss a weapon in their hands, for God's sakes. Like it's a little weird to me that you can go to Walmart, and pick up your whatever. Other people come to our country like, what the fuck? And I know that we're gonna get, everybody's gonna be like, oh, I don't care. I'm going to keep them. I grew up hog hunting in fucking Okeechobee, Florida. Like, I
Yes.
get it, dude. Like, my whole family is a bunch of rednecks. I would own one if I didn't, have the mental issues I had. Don't need to, right? I've got my own forms of home defense that I have implemented. But it's important that you point that out because it's not just people with nefarious intent. And when I say nefarious, I mean that's a different backstop than your own head, right? That's a horrible thing, a horrible tool to hand somebody in that situation because it doesn't give you a chance to contemplate.
Yeah, it is a real it's a quick method, and I'm so sorry that you have found yourself in those positions in your life. I
Appreciate that.
empathize certainly as somebody who has also just been through immense trauma and immense situations where the way out seems to be suicide. And for myself, I look to the whimsy in the world. I look to the beauty that's out there in not just myself, in others that I can meet in nature, going on walks, seeing museums, looking at art pieces, just trying to do anything to not just stay deep in that hole and continue to
I
spiral.
I love that you're doing that. And I'd like to point out that the description that you're giving is actually one that is centered around a single word, and that's mindfulness. And then behind that is gratitude, right? If we
Yeah.
practice mindfulness and we're not living in a non existent moment within our own head, no matter where we are on this rock, then we're respecting what we have and we're able to see the beauty in it. How much wasted time do we have living in moments that either have existed or have not existed, but have no influence over the current being that you are, unless you choose it to be yours? Right? So I like to commend you because that mindfulness is it's a first step towards healing in any kind of mental health, traumatic background, whatever it is. That's a key thing to be able to recognize the things around you and be grateful for what they are or how they impact you or just the sheer magnitude of the smallest things will bring you to your
And
knees when you start to look at it.
I won't pretend like I'm perfect on that
Hell
by
no.
any means. but it is something that I try to commit myself to. It's something that I truly believe is like, to each their own, of course, whatever it is that brings somebody joy. I personally find immense joy in just even the passions of others. If somebody's
Right.
really into something, they just really like it and they want to talk about it, I can listen for hours. But it's just like I'm saying, to each their own. It's whatever it is that just gets you out of that rut.
We're
But the
we're
goal
unique.
is to stay out of it.
Yeah, well, we're unique. What you're describing is the fact that weird thing that I saw the other day. I think we've all seen these, but it popped up a video, right? And you know how they put like a frequency into a sheet of metal and they put sand on it? And as you change the frequency, you can see the sand changing form to what is basically different mandalas based
Yeah.
on, how the vibration is hitting it. And I started thinking about it the other day because they say everything is vibration, right? String theory will support that, quantum physics. Now, all these things say that energy is just dense or not, or whatever it is, right? But I thought about that. There's always a center point inside of that mandala where everything originates from. And if I were to make a 360-degree view of that and say I'm a snowflake, right? Then I'm unique in and of myself. And at any point in time, as long as I'm being 100% me, I am one of those mandalas vibrating at the most beautiful frequency. We become different shapes, just like on that metal. We move based on how we're projecting ourselves from inside. If we're in a state of gratitude, if we're in a state of mindfulness, even respecting if we're upset about something or having malice or being bad day, whatever, jealous, whatever the fuck it could be, you're changing. You're in flux that whole time until what? Until you start being yourself 100% of the time. Once you do that, it doesn't change anymore. To not be yourself is a slap in the face of whomever or whatever made you. That's it.
Yeah.
Who are we to pick the right ways to do things against what is naturally, what we're naturally inclined to do? That's for somebody else. That's for fear. That's for judgment. Just like the clothes we pick out, 99% of the people put them on their back for someone else to give them some kind of accolade or to look at them favorably or whatever it might be. That's how twisted we are. So someone that's been through trauma that starts doing, mindful exercises, and you said nature and getting back to your creativity. I think that people that suffer from PTSD and mental health issues should turn up the headphones right now because this is a key element in growth. Can you tell us what brought you back to your passion for creativity and what kind of arts you're talking about?
Well, I've always tried to incorporate just my skill set in the arts
Hmm.
in the sort of political work I've done. I've made a
Sure.
multitude of PSAs. I ran social media pages. I've made all sorts of graphics and things. So I continue to use like Adobe Suite. I
Hmm.
continue
Hmm.
to carry my camera around. But obviously the content itself being much more serious, much more grounded in human tragedy. Uh, but so at first, prior to the shooting, prior to everything that had happened at my high school, I was the founder of the school improv club. I
Nice.
I had a dream of performing with the Second City in Chicago.
No shit.
Um, I
Love
I
that. That's a
did.
great dream. I lived on Ninth and State for a couple of years. I had an apartment up there. Love it.
Nice. I never ended up getting out there, but I did do a little bit of open mic stand up in Chicago back when I was 17. Uh, it was a really good time, and I really enjoyed that sort of stuff. But given the immense weight of the tragedy that I had experienced, the position I was put in, where I could talk to all these media talking heads, I could talk to members of Congress and the White House. And I was just given this immense privilege and access to these sorts of power brokers when trying to just make positive change in our society, trying to help people and save lives. So I just felt an immense obligation to that work. And I
Of
feel
course.
like after giving so many years of my time and energy, with nary getting paid for the vast majority of the work that I
But
conducted,
you didn't do it for
uh,
that.
I I didn't do any of it for the paycheck, but I still have bills to pay.
100%.
I still have things that I need to cover. So that's where I've been doing a lot of freelance creative work, videography, photography, uh, just consulting work, just anything that I can do to just stay in creative spaces. I've done press for conferences. I've done testimonial interviews. Just really anything that gets me behind a camera, anything that gets me to creating a product, because especially when it comes to a lot of this political change, it's a lot slower than we might want it to
Huh.
be.
That's an
So it's
understatement. People don't
it
understand the litigation highway and how long it takes to get things through hoops. And honestly, the number of people that utilize the amount of time that it takes to get through things in order to put people in positions where they can't afford to stay. There's a huge I had a different life before this life, and I could care less about litigation arbitration because you're right. It doesn't ever move forward. It sits, people will die waiting to see something pass that could give them life.
It is an absolute tragedy. I'll give you a personal example of it's the Safer Communities Act, which was the first federal law meant to address gun violence, meant to prevent gun violence in 30 years,
Mhm.
in just about 30 years. So that was the first time in my lifetime that any legislation federally had been passed. We had done many state laws, many city ordinances, all sorts of things lower than federal. With that one law, it took tens of thousands of people dying in shootings for Congress to act, for the White House to act, for them to finally and even still, we know to this day gun violence isn't fully prevented by that one piece of legislation.
Not.
It had it has provided money to gun violence prevention groups on the ground, violence interrupters, people who are really getting into communities and stopping shootings when they're happening. People are doing tremendous work, but it is still a slow process. And that itself, I was personally lobbying for over 3.5 years. So that's one law,
That's
three and
pretty
a half
fast.
year. And yes,
I
that is
I want to be
fast.
very honest. That is pretty
No,
fast. I mean, in fact, that's super fast considering it's a law.
well, you also have to take into account the people who have been in this fight since the 30
This is
years
true.
ago when the
Okay, so
last piece
so
of
there are
legislation.
people, predecessors that but I get you now. But
For
in
for
my
me
mindset, I'm
myself,
like,
it was a short time
yeah,
period. So it's a miracle for me,
yeah,
but there are
okay,
other
that makes
people
sense.
who
Fair enough.
they're finally breathing
Yeah.
a sigh of relief.
Columbine wasn't yesterday. I'm tracking. Yeah, so
Exactly.
I get it. There's been a lot of people that have picked up that torch and ran with it to try to help those that have been in the wake of these mass shootings or different violent activities and domestic abuse and whatever it might be. Um, but you're talking about creativity right now, right?
Yes.
And something stuck out to me when you started describing taking that left step into the political world, being thrust into the limelight and having that care, that real genuine desire because of what you've been through. We have to figure out it's either fight or flight, right? We know this, especially after that, right?
Yeah.
Humans are subject to that no matter what, fight or flight. It don't matter how much of a hero you thought you were till the day, doesn't matter. Like you're gonna run if you're gonna run, right?
Yeah.
That's the way that I look at things. But I kind of lost where I was going here on this. But in in my mind, the creativity piece
Yeah.
is a linchpin, and it's going to show people that you're getting a chance to be yourself again, right? I feel like
I
what happened then, and this is what I was going to say, is that you had your innocence stolen. You stepped to the side, and when that happened, I can't only imagine that the whimsical part of life does not exist from that day forward until it's reintegrated.
I mean, like I'm saying, I engaged from February 2018 all the way through to even the present day. I'm still engaging in these sorts of conversations with victims,
Mm,
survivors, family members,
thank you for
people
that.
who've buried loved ones. And these are, I find these conversations to be sometimes empowering, sometimes absolutely tragic. The
Mm,
fact that more and more people are joining this club that no one should have to be a member of. And it's just, I I I like where you say, like, that idea of innocence being stolen. It's that I have been told my entire life, like, oh, your 20s, this is the time, this is the best time, your happiest time, time where you can find yourself, do what you want. And it's during this time, although I have had choices,
of course.
I have also been thrust into these sorts of positions where the more humanitarian choice is the better choice, as opposed to in my mind, for the longest time, I viewed my creative passions as selfish. I viewed it
I
as
did the same thing. That's a heavy burden.
and I took that burden upon myself, but I don't want
Yeah.
to act like some sort of saint. I don't want to act like I'm all high and mighty or anything like that. It's just I wanted to do the right thing. I was taught in my upbringing to question authority. I was taught to help those in need, to stand with those who face violence and oppression. So I've been just trying to implement those lessons throughout my life and throughout the spaces I found myself in.
Absolutely, you have. I think you should probably tell yourself that it's okay to be the best version of you and not feel like you're putting other people by the wayside while doing it. I can understand what you mean and the fact that we have drawn so many lines in society that it says that if you are not doing this, then you must not care or you are in a position that is better than someone else, or we just have all these different ways to put judgmental lenses on somebody that's not doing what we're doing or not viewing it the way we're viewing it. But that's not the case, right? Because if we go back to being yourself, any version of you that is not 100% you will never be the best for the world. If you're painting a picture and you're looking over your shoulder at the people that are judging your painting and the colors you are choosing, you're going to fuck up your painting. Why? Because you're looking elsewhere and you're not doing it for the right reasons. And if you fuck up,
Yeah.
pay attention because there's a reason you fucked up. Because when you back up, guess what? That's probably the glint in the eye of the portrait that you were putting together that you think you fucked up, but ended up being the sharpest piece of the entire thing that gave it the character. Talking to my buddy Eric about AI art. AI art has its place. It does have a formula behind it that creates it, but it won't replace regular art and it shouldn't have to compete with it. Why? Because art is a fingerprint. If you feel threatened by AI art, then you're not producing art. You're producing shit for other people, in my mind. Because if you're threatened by it, then you're not putting your fingerprint on things. You don't believe in yourself enough to go as raw with your art as you possibly can. Right? That's the way I feel. And I didn't feel that way before. I stifled every bit of creativity. I worked in the corporate world. I worked in the military. I did a million jobs. I wore a million masks and I was fucking good at all of them. And you know what I learned? I can do anything, but I fucking suck at life when I'm doing anything but being me. I can look good on paper, buy an Audi, get a theater, get a bigger house. Everybody thinks you got it together. You got a tie, man. You don't get accused of shit, especially if you're white America. Fuck, man, you could run around 3 sheets to the wind with Percocet up your ass and nobody would know the difference. They'd be like, excuse me, Mr. Smith. I'm well enough to understand that, right? So I rant a bit, but you get where I'm coming from.
I get what you're coming from, and that just makes me think. Also, in a lot of this work, I mean, one thing was just engaging with a certain subset of a donor class. Uh, very much, I'm reminded of by you just say like, yeah, anyone can get away with much by wearing a tie
Oh,
and
dude,
white
it's
America.
so true.
It's that there were just some, like, sometimes I would hear deeply offensive commentary, deeply callous commentary, but they're donors. They're giving some money. So you have
I
to
don't
be
want
nice
it.
to them. and play pretty. And that is not the type of game that I like to play.
Clearly.
I'm more than happy. I'll be nice to anybody, but if you're rude to me, if you're crossing me in a way, and I'm telling you, you're like, if you're stepping on my foot, I tell you you're stepping on my foot, and you don't get off, then we're gonna have a
That's a
problem.
power play. I don't like people trying to make power plays at me. If you stand on my toes while we're talking and you don't move your foot, just like you're saying, there's probably a good chance that I'm going to break my rule of fighting and hit you square in the larynx. Like, you're not going to swallow for a good 6 months if you stand on my toe and do one of those quiet in your ear fucking conversations. No, we have to make shit like that not acceptable under any circumstances. I don't care if you got on a tie or a fucking top hat. You can't say racist shit. If we make it not okay in any circumstances, what do children do when you ignore them? They stop doing what they're doing. You just fucking slap their crap live time, and remind them when you say it, do it quick. You're going to remember this moment for the rest of your life, and you should be ashamed. And then you walk
I'm
off.
I'm big on punching Nazis. I'm big on
I
that.
say that, but I shouldn't, because again, what do you care over offense?
I mean, like I say, it's not that I'm not picking fights with anybody.
I'd punch a
but
Nazi.
If
100% would punch a Nazi.
if a Nazi comes up to me and starts talking about the white nation, like, we're not gonna be friends.
You should attack that person. I'm a big fan of political attire, only for one reason. And that is, I know who not to talk to.
Yeah.
It's a red flag from across a fucking parking lot. I'm like, we're good. I know that I don't need that conversation. If it's some kind of hateful message of some sort, this is Florida, obviously. There's passive aggressiveness on cars, on shirts, on everything, like everywhere you go. And I am a bit upset that my American flag is no longer my American flag, that it's associated with so many horrible things. And
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I've been talking to Gary for a long time that I want to come up with a campaign that takes the flag back, right? I want something
I'll say we tried that a
dude,
little bit.
yeah, I'm sure you
It
did,
didn't
man.
work too well.
I know this. It's hard when people drape themselves in something you're supposed to societally never disrespect.
Yeah.
If you're hiding underneath it to do your shady shit or say your racist things and stand with pride, then fuck off, man. You're not American in my book. You're doing the least American thing. We're supposed to be, bring us you're starving, your hunger, or where the fuck it is. Lady Liberty. She stands out there. It says something. I was lucky. I was born here. Well, no, I was born in Germany, actually. My dad was in the Air Force. So,
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm lucky. I didn't have to do anything hard to get here. If we put the hard to get here on the plates of the people that are already here and tell them they have to finish that meal before they get up or they got to get out,
Yeah.
this place would be fucking empty. Tell me, my wife, both her parents are immigrants. When I listen to the story of how my father-in-law got here from Colombia, I'm like, I know 1,000 people that would never do one of those things under any circumstances.
It's a tough journey. Like I said, that was my degree path. I studied primarily Western Hemisphere, human rights. Just worked with a lot of different migration groups. I've been to the southern border. I've met with both members of ICE, and I've met with community organizations that are helping migrants, asylum seekers. It's a real that's a whole other tragic mess.
That's bizarre to me. I say it all the time. Like, I can't wrap my head around every tragedy that's happening in the world, but I can simplify things. And at the end of the day, I feel like a human claiming land or ownership of things is kind of like a flea putting a fucking flag in a dog's ass and claiming it as theirs permanently. It doesn't work. The earth don't give a fuck about us. We're a landslide away from not existing at any moment. But we're standing, this is me or whatever. No matter where you are in the world, just respect the fact that it belongs to everyone. The world belongs to everyone. And I'm
I
saying that as I realize what is behind you in your in your room. But in my mind, I just believe that there's enough for everyone on the earth to live together.
no, and I mean, like, even
I
with
wasn't
the
referring to
signage
that as what I
behind
was saying.
no, 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 just even with the signage behind me and everything, it is meant to be liberatory. It is meant that nations of people should be free to exist as they are. They shouldn't be oppressed. They shouldn't be violently suppressed. I mean, like, even in my own history, I come from Ashkenazi Jews from the Pale of Settlement.
Hmm.
They escaped pogroms. I have ancestral stories of rape
Bro,
and
you guys went
pillaging.
through so much to be who you are. I mean, you were wiped out to one of the smallest groups there and barely made it out. And I don't even know how. Like my
It
wife has Ashkenazi Jew in her. I did no idea. And I'm like, but it makes sense. Her family before Colombia from Egypt.
It's that a lot of that strength came from just having connections in other places, having community that transcended borders and empires, that allowed for survival. Because if there was one place where they're trying to exterminate you, and there's another place that, even if it's not fully safe, it's somewhere that you can
It's not
catch your
there.
breath. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you give me two choices of a place to be, one where I'm being hurt and one where there's no hurt at the moment, I'm going to door two every
Yeah.
time. That's like asking somebody to not pull their hand off a hot stove. Fuck you. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take
But
my
so
chances with burner number two.
But so with like mentioning my family history and everything like that, I root that sort of just experience in my ideology, in the belief that, well, my family was only able to survive by transcending borders, by being able to rely
It's a
on
beautiful way to look at it.
solidarity groups, mutual aid, because they had support and because they were able to
Mm.
be sponsored into the United States. They were given homes. They were fed and clothed and housed. It's just, I can't feasibly deny that to another human being, knowing that
Under any
I would not be
circumstances,
here today.
that's a beautiful way to look at it. It's very humble. I agree with you that oftentimes we hear things like past lives, right? And a lot of people get tied up in the thought process that, oh, I might have been a ninja in this other world or some shit like that. I don't know why they get bizarre thought processes. But when you say it to me now, my mind says the struggle and the plight of the generation before me, right? Because when
Yeah.
you're born, if you're born with facial expressions, attitudes, mannerisms, guess what? You're born with pain. You're born with generational baggage. You're there to carry it forward and release it as best you can without picking more up in the process. And when you have that tenacity, because we see tenacity in groups that come from struggle, right? Places where other people would stop as their bare minimum is way behind the threshold of these people. They will continue to fight because it's in their DNA. DNA is your past life. It's your grandma, it's your great grandma, it's the one before that. Somewhere along the line, the strength of the person walking through the Red Sea is in you, if that makes sense. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Getting biblical, but yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, we're going all the way back. If we were going to say that's the generational strength that we draw upon, everybody has that. Everybody has pain that comes from those things. You could have a long stemming mental health issue in your family that is really not necessarily a mental health issue, but it's in your DNA because it needs to be scrubbed. You have to work on yourself. You have to sit down, cleanse, work on meditation, and realize that you have the ability to stop that trauma that has been coming from generation to generation being passed on. So
Powerful
I think it's
stuff.
cool. I love watching those things. I look at, past history and see where different people came from. I'm actually mad. I say it all the time at 23andMe, really mad because when they did mine, I dropped out of the fucking sky. Like I have
Yeah.
no anywhere outside of Germany, England, and France, or Great Britain, England, and France. That's it. Like I don't even have like one little faint trail headed down to like, the Mesopotamian River Valley or maybe over here to, into Africa. Nothing. Like I dropped out of the effing sky. I was like, come on, man, you guys can give me something, right? Some kind of lineage, not just white.
Yeah, mine just says Jewish. My aunt did it for everybody, and it just
It just said Jewish.
100% Ashkenazi Jew.
I mean, but at the end of the day, we're all humans, right?
Yeah.
I love the seasonings of humanity, right? I
Funny
love,
way to put it,
and
but
if they're
yeah.
mixed correctly, you get soup. But if you
Yeah.
start adding shit that shouldn't be in there, it's fucked up. And you can't unseason soup. So you got to pick
Uh,
and choose what you put into situations. If you're bringing negativity to the situation, you already lost. You can't take negativity back out of a boiling pot.
yeah.
You got to dilute it or wait, find another pot.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So where is your creativity taking you now? What's the next project? What's the next step for Ryan?
Well, it's a range because I just have never really believed putting all your eggs in one basket. So I just continue to move, continue to do various things. Right now, it's I'm looking at the open mic nights just around Manhattan, around Brooklyn, up here in New York. I'm looking at doing production assistant work for various jobs. Obviously, given the actors strike, it's a little
Yeah.
difficult when it comes to filmed things. But when it comes to stage, when it comes to things in theater on Broadway, there's still a lot more work going around. But for myself personally, there's a series of video essays that I've always been meaning to make that I have scripts for, things for like the movie Lion King 1.5, for instance. Uh,
Here we go. I
just
was waiting for this side of Ryan. I knew it was coming because when I was doing my research, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Birds aren't real? That's fucking amazing, dude. You were behind the social media on that fucking phenomenon. Like,
when
it
it
was
was really
phenomenal the way that
taking
it
off.
grew so fast.
When it was really taking off, they needed some support. So I helped out with the Facebook, I helped out with the Twitter, the Instagram. Uh I did a lot of the direct messages because I like adding that personal touch to like I hate auto replies on
Same.
anything. Like
Can't
if
stand it.
you're gonna take if you're gonna take the time to talk to this, like engage with whether it's an institution, whether it's a celebrity, like if they're going to reply, I want it to be a human response. So I would always come up with things like, "Thank you for joining the Bird Nation. Your support,
You know, I would
your
do all
support
sorts of
will
shit if you
help
put me in
us."
that seat. I would. There,
I Yeah, but I did all that because I really wanted to say, with from my chest, I wanted to say that I was a professional satirist.
I
And
love it, dude. Well, here's the thing. You're not necessarily wrong at the same time. So you got to go out on a limb, go tongue in cheek, have some fun, but are not dumb enough to know that it's probably fucking true to a certain degree. I knew I was effed when I was watching TikTok and this dude took a drone off like the size of my fucking pinky finger at 200 miles an hour. And I'm like, you think they can't shag one up like a pigeon? Like all day long. Cameras the size of my pinky finger. Of course they're out there. But birds aren't real was fucking funny to me. As soon as I looked, I was like, this is perfect. What a great fucking. You had to meet the greatest people.
I was doing most of the work remotely, so I only got to talk
So
over Zooms and things, but it was a riot. Just talking out what their plans
I
were, like what like because I joined up with them right before like as they were doing like 60 Minutes and New York Times, and they were going to South by Southwest, like they were really taking off, and they needed help on their back end. So I was just supporting, making sure that all the fans, all the birders were out there, the bird truthers.
the birders. They had names.
And I
See,
mean, look, like
this warms my heart. When I see
it was a
nonsense,
field
I get
day.
happy.
It was a field day when Musk changed Twitter. because that was something that we had actually been asking for, to Jack.
Why it was surveilling everybody via a bird.
We wanted them to just join the cause, and Musk has actually shared some things, which is
He's not
surprising.
stupid. I did read the backstory on it. How the group came together and the historical facts behind it, or facts. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you take it with a grain of salt. Part of the things are like, well, I can see some of this. Like, it kind of makes sense. And then I did think the other day, or not the other day, but when I was reading this,
Yeah.
I have not seen nearly as much bird shit as I used to see.
I mean, the government isn't faking the shit, that's for sure.
Right? That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, well, if there's no shit, but there's birds. I'm like, I don't know. Like, used to be a big problem, all the time. Your car would be covered in that stuff, but now it just doesn't seem to happen nearly like it used to.
I mean, I take a lot of road trips, and I definitely notice what you're saying.
Right?
I've had a lot less on my windshield.
I feel like it was a huge thing for a while and it did die off. Like, even in like comedy and satirical things, you wash your car, the proverbial bird dropping right off.
Yeah.
That joke is even gone. Nobody even does that. So it's like,
Not common enough.
no,
It's not
it's
relatable
not.
enough.
No, it's not relatable anymore. Why is it not relatable? It bothers me. Always stay mildly suspicious. Anything that
Yeah.
I read, I sniff for implicit bias. I try to just go through, like, I don't know, that you can't be Helen Keller and get information at the same time, but I try not to take in other people's fucking info. I keep it as sterile as I possibly can. Or I make a note to always pay attention to the person's viewpoint, that it's them commentating, that I'm not
Yeah.
reading fact. Because that's really hard for some people to delineate. They think after they've perused a book that because it's been written, that means it's fact. And like, no, that's because it was written. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, I can write all sorts of shit. The test of time does not make it fact.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do this for fun, just exercise like writing sometimes, where it's, you know how articles all the time they have hyperlinks, like the blue text, like you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
click and you can go somewhere else. Yeah. So I always put links that don't have anything to do with what I'm saying. They don't
Beautiful.
prove the claim at all, but it looks real. So I sometimes just I haven't published any of these. I just share them with friends, and I'm just like, hey, look at this
Bro,
article.
you
Isn't this wild?
should. This is the thing. I would argue that the people closest to you and the people that you're sharing those things with would probably agree with me if they said that's the Ryan that should show up at the comedy show, that should come into interviews, and that should be a part of everyone's life because that's the realest Ryan. And I'm not saying you're not real. I'm saying
Yeah.
that's the least inhibited Ryan. I want
Yeah.
to have you come back on after you do some stand up, because that's something that I have people pushing me to do. And it's
Yeah.
way out of my comfort zone. I was bullied really bad. I was told to shut the F up growing up. I was told that I wasn't worthy or worthwhile or all those things. So any talent, any propensity to be in front of people was completely wiped off the plate. So I commend you for stepping into that new part, that new opportunity, because you're on a big stage, dude. New York City's
Yeah.
smallest clubs are the biggest bang. So no matter where you land, you never know who the hell's going to be sitting there. But that's not to say to discourage you. That's to say that if you've got one chance, be a fucking snowflake. Not the ones they're talking about either. Be Ryan.
Yeah.
100% Ryan. And I bet for sure that satirical shit, when you talk about linking things together, when you find a way to weave that tapestry of a story and throw those witty things in there, people are going to shit themselves. They're going to laugh so hard because there's another phenomenon that comes in comedy.
Yeah.
Generally, it comes from trauma. The best comedians have been to fucking hell and back. Go ask Pete Davidson. He'll tell you what his life feels like, right?
Yeah.
You know? And some of the best comedians of like Robin Williams, he had his whole traumatic background and all the shit he went through. Dude, but they're the funniest people. Right? Because in order to get through things, you have to take things less seriously.
Comedy and tragedy.
Look at the logo, man. That's our logo. Yeah. And the masks represent the inauthenticity that we have in our interactions in life. If you pick up the phone for AT&T and then you pick up the phone for your mom, if the voices are different that you use, you should know you're not being real. Now multiply those. What about your interview voice? What about your, I'm going to try to pick up this girl voice? What about all these personas? But at the end of the day, the human mind is only supposed to have one. So where do you think mental illness starts to come from? You have to remember every person that you were, not just who you are, because you're always afraid of going back to an interaction and not remembering who the mask was at that time. There's a burden in that. The older you get in life, that's called a midlife crisis. If you've been so many different people, so much so that you're holding a sack of masks over your shoulder everywhere you go, eventually you're going to collapse.
Yeah.
The odd thing, you didn't have to hold them to begin with. It was a self-imposed pain. All out of fear of being hurt.
Yeah.
Weird, right? And weird animals. I can't wait to see you get on stage and unleash that wit. I would love if you send me some of your writing, dude. I would love to take a look at it. I love creativity, and comedy for sure.
I need to write a lot more to share a lot of my stuff because most of what I've done was primarily back in high school because, like I said, I've just been overwhelmed and inundated with the political.
I would say I'm glad that you're revisiting Ryan before the Innocence was taken.
Yeah.
Right? That's going to be so cool. You should look back at that guy and look at the beard that you have now and that cool hair that you have. You have dope hair, man. It's like, it's
Thank you.
It's a good hairstyle. So you look back at that kid and you tell him thank you. Right? Thank you for being strong enough to get you where you are. That kid didn't do anything wrong. Didn't deserve it. And you deserve a chance to be on your feet again, pursuing what you love and what you're passionate about. And don't feel guilty for not advocating for everything else in the world all the time. Because the world is not at its whole without you being you. Right? The benefits of having Ryan in our life may be the comedy at this point. Maybe the advocacy is part of the comedy. Comedy heals wounds.
Yeah.
Really does. So do you have anything you want to put out before we wrap up?
Well, definitely want to get the couple phrases across, things that have helped me just throughout my journey. Things that I've felt have been very powerful. One, this phrase, I heard this from Professor Marshall Gans. He worked with Cesar Chavez, California labor movement, and also in the early Obama administration. He's a professor from Harvard. He says, you never know what someone else is waiting to hear. So it's just always being open to those conversations with others. I feel like a lot of this session has been a therapy session. I feel like you're gonna bill me.
No, dude, I hope I didn't give you too much therapy there. Sorry about that.
No, it was good. I'm saying it as a positive.
Okay.
Like,
you never know, man. I get a little ranty, but I feel the onus is on me to help people now that I have a certain set of lenses at this point in my life and at this juncture, and especially for your generation. I feel like your generation's one of the strongest ones, the most empathetic out there. However, much like Cyclops and X-Men, The empathy runs rampant without glasses. Without wisdom, it mows shit down.
Yeah.
Everybody's life is on the block. So, getting the opportunity like this to give someone like yourself an extra lens to be able to focus that empathy even better, it's my job.
I want to speak to what you said with where people tell you like maybe you should go out there doing stand up. I think if you're comfortable in any case doing it, I say go ahead, try it. The worst that happens is you spent a night talking on a stage. If you're not comfortable doing that sort of stuff in person, record an album, record something for
Not
yourself,
a
and then
bad
just play
idea.
it for
Go old
people.
school Adam Sandler. Did you
Yeah,
ever listen to those
it.
old CDs? I think you'd love
I've
that.
listened to a couple of them.
Oh,
I listened.
it's beauty.
But it's just for me personally in my journey. My father is a biochemist. He throughout his entire life he's been going on stages discussing various medicines with doctors. So I've just from a very early age understood, oh, some people just get paid to talk in front of
Mm,
others.
correct.
That's just a thing. So I never feared speaking in front of
No,
others. I never had that fear. I know many people who aren't comfortable speaking in front of crowds. And for that, it's just to each their own, do what you can.
right. Well, you're either
And
made for it or you're not. You have a different talent deep within you that'll show itself in a different way. I got no problem being who you want me to be on stage. I have a problem
mm,
being myself on stage because I have low self esteem and I don't
yeah,
have that self love that I should. And this whole show has been a journey in that. That throughout this whole entire venture, it's gone from audio to video to looking at people to fuck. Now they're making me do TikToks. I don't want to do that shit, but I don't want
yeah.
to do it not because it won't be fun. I don't want to do it not because I'm not going to enjoy it while it happens or that I'm going to reach people or anything like that. I don't want to do it because I'm ashamed of me for weird ways that nobody else could ever even fathom. Because nobody cares what I look like. They only care what they look like. Try to remember what somebody wore to work yesterday. You can't. You only remember what you wore, unless it was Carl with the pit stains that he always wears. Nobody remembers what the other person wore. They're always thinking about themselves. But it's a fear that I have too. Getting up in front of people and being me is completely different because nobody's being me. Nobody's being themselves. They're not.
Our own worst critics. I certainly have a lot of that negative self voice too. And it has stopped me from performing for a long time. But I just say to you, just like it is that self-love factor.
Mm,
It has to come from yourself. Uh I think personally for me, it's like if I'm really feeling down on myself, self-esteem is down,
mm.
I just get cheerleaders, whether that's friends, whether that's
Amen.
family, people that I know like will gas me up even if it's a terrible set. And
I love
then
it.
we had a good night. It's like I can't believe you did the worst jokes on stage. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it happened.
But when you have that group of people that you can be that vulnerable with, there's nothing better because then it's not a far fall being
Yeah.
yourself. When you have friends there with you, when you do get the opportunity to just be you, it's not the fall that you believe it would be. It's not as difficult as you believe. It's allowing, I'll even say this, the moment that you love yourself around those people, they're going to accept anything that you do because you love yourself. Nobody loves people that don't love themselves. And I'm sure that when you're in the presence of your friends, you love yourself because you feel yourself through them. You know that they're there with you. So I would say you always should have hype men. You should always have your friends. Gary's motto, he's not here today, but Gary's motto is hype your friends, right? No
Mhm.
matter who it is out there, I don't care what you're fucking drawing. Dude, that's the best version of what you did today, right? It's not a
Yeah.
lie. At any given moment, it's the best of what you've done in that moment because the rest of it isn't here anymore. Unless you've got a time machine, it doesn't matter. It's all about loving what you have now, right? Hype
Yeah.
your friends, get that group of people around you, and laugh at mistakes, dude. Mistakes are fucking funny. Dude, so funny. I've done so much stupid shit. I've been here tied up with wires or screaming at video editing, not realizing that I just simply didn't have something on that I should have, or It's always me. Like I'm angry at the world in these situations, and then I find out it was me. But there's a difference between now and my past lives. I'm not angry that I'm doing this. I love doing this. I love being angry at this. I love being sad at this. I love being happy at this. Why? Because it's me. For the first time in my life, I enjoy fucking up because I'm not going to fuck it up again. And I know the next one's going to be better every single time. I'm like, get it out of the way. All right, it's fucked up. I don't care now. Before I cared so much that I wasn't painting my own picture. And you're about to go to jail.
They are coming.
They are coming. Ryan, give me another quote before you go, because I know you had a
Yes.
couple. I want another
Yeah,
one.
I just this one last one. It's I
I
put
hope
these
it
on
goes
my
well with
business.
sirens, because that will make me laugh.
It's Mount Sinai Hospital. Hope
Oh,
everyone's
that's sad.
okay. But they're just up the street. But it's so there's this one quote. I put these on my business cards when I was going around the country. This is a quote from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. Translated, it is to save a life is to save the world entire. Basically meaning that each life, each person, each interaction has the ability to have a ripple effect,
Yay.
to impact so many other people who say one conversation that your grandfather had could easily be the reason that something's happening this week. And it's very hard to measure.
It really
It's
is.
very, but it's a quote that I hold true and near
I,
and dear to my heart when I'm working on violence prevention work, human rights work, or even just comedy, just talking to people, sharing observations, because you never know, like I said, you never know what someone's waiting to hear, and each interaction could breathe new life.
I pass out keys. It's not up to me to pick the locks. It's not up to me whether you use them. They might even hit the ground. Someone will pick it up when it's their time. And it might be the first lock or the last lock in a succession of locks that give them that understanding. It's not my job to convince anybody of anything. I used to think this. I used to stand on a soapbox and yell, "You're better than this. Why don't you see this? Why can't you get this through your head? You know it's wrong. I can see you willingly fighting this for whatever reason. Going to be judged by somebody, whatever it is, right? Can see you doing that, but you don't have to. You don't have to defend things that don't mean shit, right? The ripple
Yep.
effect is the ripple effect. We're supposed to be good to each other for the simple fact that when you do unto someone, right? You don't have to be religious to understand this. Do unto others is very simple, because if I always treat you well when I interact with you, how are you going to view me when you come back? Well, you're going to
Yep.
be happy to see me every time. What happens with our interactions in life if we're always trying to do right by each other, each interaction? We're never upset to see each other. You will attract good people through good actions, through good karma, through caring, no matter how minuscule it is. You could be that key. I don't care if it's that little old luggage key. You remember that one that I don't even know how they expect you to keep that motherfucker big, right? But
Yeah.
that might be the key to grandma's lock that she needed to understand, in order to get the chance to reconcile her entire life just through one understanding. Oh, shit. I get it now. So I see you passing out keys. And I would say continue to pass out keys. Give them different coatings. If you're a comedian, make them rubber coated or give them polka dots or make them fucking smell or do something, scratch and sniff keys, fucking all sorts of shit. But Ryan, keep throwing keys. Be a lighthouse. I say that to everybody. Be a lighthouse, because a lighthouse doesn't have to do shit except for be itself, and it will guide people the way to go. They'll find their own direction. They don't even have to come to you. They just need to know that someone else out there is strong enough to be themselves, and then they can stand up and do the same. So my hat's off to you. And I apologize for being the generation that let your innocence be taken away. And to those children, I apologize just because it hurts my heart to think about that situation. But I do recognize that you're not holding that against me or anybody else at this juncture, which is honestly good for you more than anything.
We're all in this together.
Dude,
we're all on this earth. We're all in this country. We're all experiencing these things at different levels, at different times, at different intensities. But we are all here. We're all on this boat. And I just want to see it keep floating.
It's going to, because of people like you. I genuinely appreciate you, Ryan. All right. Remember, everybody, be cool and keep learning. Just 1 second.